Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Duke You Suck podcast. I'm here for our first show with my good friend. I'm honored to have him on the show as my first guest. Ladies and gentlemen, TJ Wilson.
Hey,
Welcome to the
thanks a lot
program,
for having me.
TJ.
I really appreciate it.
How are you, man?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks. It feels funny saying this again because, of course, we exchanged pleasantries when we started. So I feel weird being that media guy. Yeah, it's going to take some getting used to. How
we
are
start
things,
having
man? You
double
guys?
conversations.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a stupid ass question, but you guys aren't getting any of the cold and stuff that Texas is getting, are you?
No, I mean it's been chilly for Florida
Right.
for this time of year, but I mean no snow, no kind of like no crazy stuff like that. Like I saw that like 100 car pileup was insane, man.
Oh, can you
In Texas.
imagine? Well, I
Oof.
mean, kind of one of the things that bothers me now, there's some Albertans sort of laughing at Texans and their power grid and stuff. And it's like, you know what, man, that was us in 2013 with the floods. And I didn't hear anybody in Texas laughing at us. Like, they're
Yeah.
not prepared
When,
for
when
that,
it's some
right?
sort of thing that whatever area you're in is not like here in Florida. We're used to a lot of hurricane warnings and tropical storms. So like the houses are, especially newer ones, are built for that. We kind of understand that. So like if
Right.
I mean, how would it? But like if a hurricane were to hit Calgary, they wouldn't be prepared for it. Much like if it were to snow here, we would not be prepared for it one bit.
Well, even I mean, a few years ago, I want to say 2016, maybe there was a tornado warning that touched down, maybe 30 kilometers from my house. And man, we were freaking out. Like, what do we
Yeah,
do? Like, go to the basement, go to the stairs, and I'm in the basement under my stairs with a hot water tank and an electrical panel. And I'm like, well, this can't be the best place to stand, you know?
yeah, those are freaky. I've had a couple of tornado warnings living here too, where it's like,
Yeah.
what do you do? I don't. I just
Well,
want to
and
be
I
in my.
always want to reach out and ask you, like, hey, man, is everything okay? But I also know you're probably getting about 8,000 of those messages. So it's like,
Uh,
no news is good news on that front kind of thing.
yeah, and you know what? I've lived here now almost 14 years, and so far, knock on wood, we've averted any kind of like there've been like two that I can think of, two hurricanes that were like supposed to had a good chance of hitting, and maybe we're going to do some damage. And then at one point, that last one in 2017, it kept like they changed course, which is something I now kind of understand. I didn't understand before, but now when you see it on the news all day long during hurricane season, it makes sense. But
Yeah, for
anyway,
us, it's all scary.
yeah, and at one point the cool thing was one of the safe shelters was like literally like 3 blocks away from me at this elementary school that they had just built. So I was like, okay, I think my house will be safe if the safe zone is 2 blocks from my house. So I think I'll be okay. And I was actually up in Alberta that weekend. I went to UFC.
Okay.
Natty was here by herself, and then but anyway, it was all taken care of. It was, I'd rather prepare for the worst and then get the best, which is kind of what happened. It rained a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you prepare for absolute disaster, I mean, worst case scenario, okay, I was over prepared. If that's a
Yeah,
bad thing, then I'll take it.
yeah, it's definitely not a bad thing if it could, especially if you realize it could be the opposite.
Yeah,
You
like,
could think
and
it's going to be nothing, and then it's huge.
well, and you perennially hear people say things like, "Oh, it can't get any worse." Like, don't say that. Don't. It could always like, "Oh, this global pandemic, it can't be any worse." Yeah, it could. It could
it
definitely
could
be
it could be a lot
worse.
worse. It could be a
You
lot
know.
worse.
Yeah. So, and you guys are doing okay with that. I mean, obviously, work's changed quite a bit for you over the last year, but otherwise, you guys are doing okay. Everybody's healthy and safe.
Yeah, I mean it changed, but it changed in almost for me. For a bunch of us that live in Florida, almost it's convenient.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously, it's not quite the same. It's not quite the same atmosphere. We are used to being these beings that travel every week, and like I'm used to being in an airport multiple times a week, every week, like
Right.
not sometimes, but 52 weeks a year, flying multiple times a week. And for almost the last year, I drive to work. They keep bringing it closer to my house. They keep bringing it closer. Originally, it was at the Performance Center. Then Amway's just like from my house, like 5 minutes closer.
Oh
Then
yeah.
to St. Pete at the Thunderdome in Tropicana. And so like that's like 45 minutes from my house, 50 minutes. So like it keeps getting closer, closer,
Yeah.
closer, closer,
I can
closer.
only assume that's the office saying, okay, make it more convenient for kid in Natalia. That's
Yeah,
gotta
I
be.
think so. I mean,
Yeah.
I would have to. I
It's
can't
probably
see what
coming
else
up
they would
even
do.
in creative, like, hey man, when are we moving closer to TJ?
There you go. Then they'll be
Yeah.
on the right.
Yeah. Hey, did you did you actually watch UFC last night? Kind of, you mentioned UFC, it kind of brought
Yep,
me back.
I saw the Derek Lewis fight. Yep.
Geez, how about that knockout, man?
Man, I was there live for the Conor and Khabib fight, and he fought the Russian.
Right.
Not Olenek. I forget the guy's name, man. He just fought a few weeks ago, too. Really tall guy, but Derek was losing the 2 rounds. I remember texting my friend. My friend's like, Derek Lewis sucks. I said, dude, I like him. He's a funny guy.
Personality, man.
Yeah. And then literally he just said, I said, I like him. He said, well, why do you like him? He sucks. I literally, obviously probably bad reception. I was in Vegas at T-Mobile, and literally I got that text, and then like Derek Lewis knocked him out with like, because Lewis was losing. He was losing the first 2 rounds for sure. And so he knocked him out with like maybe 40 seconds to go in the third. And
I do remember this fight. I do remember this fight.
The crowd erupted, man. It was the one where he took his shorts off. Live.
Yeah, his balls was hot.
Live we couldn't understand him, was the only problem.
Oh, okay. That's one of the most memorable promos of all time.
And it's funny because if you watch it back, you'll see like not a lot of people in the arena are laughing, I don't think. Especially not a big
pop for it.
Yeah, like, but it became such a funny thing that he said. Just the audio was bad, and it's funny, man. I do realize, and I know this is maybe a bit of a shill, but I do realize that like nobody does things like WWE in terms of like quality checks and things like little things that I maybe would never have thought of before. Right. And now working on this side of things, I kind of see like I would never see a promo in WWE that unless it's crazy.
Could you imagine if the fans in the building couldn't hear what Roman Reigns had to say?
Yes, exactly my point.
Less than thrilled.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing I've always said about WWE. I mean, even going back to WCW, who was spending a fortune. I mean, those guys were dropping cash. TNA when they first started coming out. Yeah. Now AEW's there. It doesn't matter what wrestling product or what promos or what vignettes and stuff they do. Everyone else's product, the production looks a little bush compared to WWE. Like, I don't care what, there's lots of times where the wrestling might be better back and forth and things like that, but across the board, night in, night out, nobody even touches WWE's production. Like, it's not even close.
Yeah, when it comes to the cameras and production and the things that our production guys can do, like I've sent Kevin Dunn so many texts after shows, just like, I don't even know how. I was said like, it's totally out of my realm. I don't know how you guys pulled off what you pulled off, like the Undertaker AJ match from WrestleMania, the cinematic match. Like,
yeah, that was insane.
Nobody. I remember them leaving to go to the shoot. I remember them leaving the Performance Center to go to the shoot, but like, okay, in my mind, that doesn't tell me what it's going to look like or what it's going to feel like. I thought like it's going to look like. I don't know, like there's a match with like Finley and Regal, and later on there's like a Cena and Eddie Guerrero one where they're like in a parking lot with cars all around and stuff. And so I thought maybe it was something like that. I didn't expect it to be that cinematic match. And I know that came from Matt Hardy and that type of thing, but then what it's developed into, that Undertaker AJ match, I have so many people who were like raving about that match.
Well, to me, it was one of those, there was a lot of negativity. Of course, it doesn't matter what WWE does, right? Like there's somebody there to shit on it. But to me, it was like they had an opportunity to do something really cool with production, and they did something really cool with production.
Yeah.
And and I don't think other companies, as much as they try, like, and again, the times are different, but like, when you'd see like the flat deck truck matches and stuff like that, the production was always just terrible, right? And you just don't see that from the WWE.
And that's another one. I think those guys got fired right after that match, to be honest.
See what happens, and it wasn't their fault; it was production.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
So I think it was Dustin Rhodes, and I think it's Demolition Smash.
Okay, I always remember Dustin
Rhodes. Blacktop Bully, and I think like the producer, whoever's like somebody else, like all three got fired.
Oh, really?
It was always the story. That's like at least the rumor, because then Goldust comes to WWF like so shortly after that.
Right.
So I don't know if it's 100% true, but that was like the theory at the time, or the
like, can you imagine? So that right or wrong, hey, now that's going to follow you. Like your match was so shitty, you got fired. Like I've had a lot of shitty matches, but I never got fired, even from indie promotion.
And it's so funny because like Goldust is like so good, and you got like Smash, who like Demolition's this iconic tag team, especially for me. Like that's a tag team,
Yeah.
like probably the first tag team I ever really saw as a fan. And so like, you know,
Yeah.
how are you gonna tell them they had such a bad match they gotta go?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like two legends, like, oh, sorry, boys, you're just not cutting it. Come
Yeah, I
on.
mean, but you're right. Like WCW is just doing random. Like that was uncensored '95, I think,
Right.
and later just doing kind of random things.
Geez, man, I barely remember the match. You can tell me what arena it happened in and what the attendance was.
Dude, like this happens. This is like in my daily conversation all the time. This happens in the locker room. These kind of talks all the time, and like, it'll always be something brought up. I'll say some kind of an arena or something, and then someone else goes, "Oh, you're right," and then they're like, "How do you?" And then it's always the same
Yeah, how do you do
conversation.
that? Yeah, I can do it with part numbers, which is completely useless in life. But you know, if you need an oil filter for your welder, man, I'm your guy.
Yeah,
Um,
that's awesome.
so I want to shift a little bit to something I haven't heard you talk too much about. I
Sure.
wanted to, how did the idea for Workhorse Fitness come up? Like how did the idea to start a supplement line come up for you?
So I was working. I'd been injured, and then I realized yeah, pretty quick, but I realized after a while, like I had a bunch of friends keep coming down to visit me, and it was that was awesome. Uh, However, like it becomes so much easier to eat junk food when you have a bunch of friends around that are, you know, from out of town. Like Grizz came down, Corey came down, Dan and Pete came down.
Right.
Uh,
Whole
so you
crew.
go, yes, but at different times. It wasn't like Dan and Pete came together, but then Grizz came for a week or a few days by himself. Then Corey came for a week by himself. So I had like these different staggerings of friends coming to visit me,
Right.
which was awesome. I needed that, but what I didn't need was all the pizza and the donuts that come along with that, and all the junk food that.
Fair enough.
And I'm injured at the time, and so I'm thinking like, well, you know, I've been dieting for all these years. I may as well let loose a little bit. And I kept thinking, well, I know I'm not wearing spandex again, not anytime soon, so I'm okay. But what I didn't realize is like I remember this. I heard in this rap song, this Bishop Lamont. He said it's easier to keep up than it is to catch up. And I'd always like joke around. I've said that a few times as a joke. And I realized like after a period of time, I was like, okay, it's time to start training again and get my body back. And then I'm like training. And then like it was hard. I was like, oh my God, I'm still like I'm in okay shape, but I'm not in the shape I was in. And then like WrestleMania was going to be in Orlando, or not was going to be. WrestleMania was coming up. It was in Orlando, and I knew I hadn't seen a lot of the guys in close to 2 years, and I knew I was going to be there, and so I was training so hard to try to get back into shape. And like I looked okay, but I wasn't in like my best shape, and I wasn't in the shape like that.
You weren't quite
That
in game shape.
Yeah, not the shape that
Yeah.
like the talent would remember me in. I was like, oh my God. And then I just remember like it was
Yeah, but
hard.
let's not bullshit each other. You were never in like, oh, TJ let himself go shape either.
I felt like I was, but that was like I'm still wearing my neck brace, but maybe not. But
Right.
that's just in my mind.
Yeah.
But so anyway, it just I realized how hard it is to actually like it was one thing when I like got my body into a certain groove and I'm wrestling 5 days a week. And if you have a cheat meal here or there, but you're wrestling 5 days a week on top of working out 6 or 7 days a week, it's okay. Your body, but when like my workouts were, especially right after surgery and after the injury, my workouts were pretty tame, really, really like the training wheels were on. And I'm obviously not wrestling. So like, you don't realize like that calorie intake versus outtake, or I don't know. Anyway, it just was a battle.
You know it. You're just not thinking about it.
Yeah. And then, so anyway, I was like, I made it a big goal to get I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a goal to get in the best shape possible, even better shape than when I was a wrestler, to prove that like, just because I don't wrestle anymore, I'm not just dogging it. I'm going to get in even better shape. And, one of my friends, Alex, he started kind of, one point I was doing a bunch of signings and stuff, and he was kind of keeping track for me. And he would be the one kind of like, controlling the email. That way, like I didn't have to answer a lot of people.
Okay.
He was kind of the middleman.
Right.
And anyway, a supplement company had like reached out or something to want me to post stuff about them, and they would send me a bunch of stuff. And
Okay.
Alex was like, so Alex looked into it and was like, hey, this is cool. He's like, but even another cool idea might be, have you ever thought about starting your own? And he knew a kid that had started his own locally and like used this company in Georgia. So we started looking into it, and the company in Georgia, the distribution company, they're the ones who have all the ingredients. They have all these different tiers, A, B, C of ingredients. And so they're like, oh, here's the BCA ingredients, A, B, C. Here's the pre-workout, A, B, C. Here's the protein. And I was like, okay, well, this might be a dumb question, but why are there tiers? Why is it not just A and that's it? And they're like, well, because it's cheaper, obviously. The more ingredients, the better quality ingredients, the more expensive.
People don't want to admit it, but there's a reason that bucket of protein at Costco is $20.
Yeah, so the profit margin increases with the lesser ingredients. But I was like, okay, so you're telling me there's a chance the pre-workouts and stuff I have been taking they might be B or C, a little bit of A, a little bit of C, then I don't know. And then they're like, yeah, possibly, because you can mix match whatever you want. Like these guys can do everything for you. They do, like, you can add whatever you want.
You can be like, yeah, give me 40% A, 60% C kind of thing.
Yeah, and you can specifically pick out every ingredient you want. Like you can do everything with these guys. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to try this out my own, and I'm going to only use A stuff. And then like what kind of feedback I get, we can add and subtract things. But like initially we had this glycerol that was, I think that's what it was called, but it's for a pump. But it was like, it really helps with the pump, but it was too much. It was 2,500 milligrams, which is normal in a lot of things. But I think a lot of places have the same problem. It clumps up, the pre-workout clump. If it gets any kind of moisture, even a little drop, it like sucks it all in and clumps up and becomes like, I started just almost eating it like I break it off like a piece of candy and eat it to work out. But
I was just scooping it out like ice cream.
But I can't sell that to people like that. But so it's just a lot of it was like trial and error. So obviously take that glycerol out, put more pink Himalayan sea salt in, which is good for a pump. And they gave me some other kind of. These guys are real smart guys. They'll tell us like, okay, like this is because they do this for a lot of companies. They're
chemists for a reason, right? It's not like they're at home. It's not like you and me mixing it up in our bathtub.
Exactly. And so they're like, well, right now, this company, this is their best selling thing. This is what they're doing.
Okay.
This is their ingredients. This is the ones they're using. So they tell me they're real cool. They're like real open about everything. You could just, it's real cool. Cause like if I want a sample, if I'm like, well, does this work if you take this out and put this in with this flavor? Oh. And they're like, well, we'll send you a sample. You tell us if it works.
Oh, really? Wow, that's fun.
Yeah, they're awesome. And so they've sent us so many samples over the last like 3 years, like so much. I have so many samples around my house of random things. Random like pumpkin spice protein powder and random thing, like for a holiday one. They talk about it like doing well. So it's just, and even like the maple donut protein flavor, which has been our best selling one.
Is that right?
We kind of explained to them like, okay, maple donut's kind of this like it kind of a Canadian thing.
I was just gonna say it's a Canadian thing.
Yeah, and so like that one, they didn't just. A lot of times they just have the flavor already ready, but that one they had to actually custom make.
Oh, okay. So
the maple donut.
That's an exclusive Workhorse.
Yeah, so that's been awesome to see the success of it because it was exclusive and a lot of people love it.
That's right on. Good to hear, man. So in that overall business wise, that's doing well for you. I assume with the pandemic, people
we just in the process of restocking on a bunch of stuff. Same thing, like just with the pandemic, just slowed. At one point, we started getting a lot more sales, but then it started slowing. But like the production, like at one point, like the clothing comes from New York. So at one
Okay.
point, New York totally shut down.
Yeah.
We'd ordered like the white sleeveless hoodie we had ordered. Was it the white one? Maybe. And it just like we got it months later. And these guys are normally very fast. They're like, hey, listen, if you want to cancel the order, we understand. And we're like, no, it's okay. Like the whole world's going through this pandemic. I get it, man. I have no problem waiting.
Yeah.
And he said,
Like,
well,
sorry, go ahead.
no, and at one point by New York law, only 1 or 2 people at a time are allowed in the building,
Right.
in this warehouse that they have. So they're trying to like put together all these orders where normally it's like, I don't know how many people they might have in the building, but I mean, at least 10 or 15. And
You assume more than one.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's good, man. That's good to hear. So with that, have you had to kind of dedicate a lot of time? Like, do you, this is going to sound weird, but do you like go to I know with the Mr. Olympia in Vegas, there's always that big fitness expo.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered, or do you do booths at things like that? Or
I haven't done any of those yet. We did get a little tent. It was like, it was not expensive. So we bought one just to have it in case. There's maybe, it's funny. I think maybe the Olympia just happened in Orlando not too long ago, but a couple of years ago, there was some other expo was going to happen in Orlando that I think Alex was going to go to.
Okay.
And it turned out like, didn't quite meet the qualification like in time. I think we submitted the stuff too late or something.
Right.
But I've been to one once completely by accident. We had Money in the Bank in Chicago.
Okay.
And we were at the hotel. And so I fly in the day before. And I go to the gym. I go straight to the gym because we had like rehearsal or something. So I went straight to the gym. And I've been to this gym so many times, this LA Fitness in Chicago. I've been there so many times. And I was like, there's like extra like jacked people in here today. And then I went to the hotel and they were like, did valet parking. There's like 2 cars in front of me, and both cars, people getting out of the cars are like extra jacked. And I was like, okay, this isn't a coincidence that I saw like that you could tell that look with that like super jacked with super tan.
Yeah, these guys are all contest ready.
Yeah, and then it was a bunch of women too, and I was like, oh, and it turned out there was a contest going on at that hotel in a convention.
Right.
And so like I remember walking around, and like I'm a big fan of like they don't really exist anymore, the baggy sweatpants.
Oh yeah, the good old bodybuilder
thing of the past. Yeah, but exactly, they had them. So I'm like walking around and found a couple pairs there.
Yeah, I went to one, Chris Steele, I've always considered, at 6 feet-ish, 250, a pretty big guy. And we were down in Vegas a few years ago during the Mr. Olympia, like when that was going on. And first of all, I felt like a short, fat troll, but I've never really walked down the street and thought Chris Steele isn't a big man until that week. You know what I mean? Like, there were some monsters.
I know. It's crazy. Like I met Phil Heath a couple years ago. He was backstage at a show.
Okay.
And he was like so cool, but man, yeah. So he's so big. He's so big.
Well, he was doing autographs when we were there, and somewhere on my phone, I just have a picture of his shoulder and arm. So you talk to people and they're like, well, how big are those guys really? It's like, well, okay, here's a picture of this guy's arm, and it's like as wide as your body, right? It's like, you don't even know. Like, you just don't understand.
Yeah. Exactly. And then when like, and then it's funny, and then I also get a little bit of the opposite of that sometimes. Like I'm around these like like Eric Rowan is like a 6'8", 340-pound guy.
Right.
Braun Strowman, like same thing, man. Like he might even he sometimes is maybe even like 360, 380. This guy. These are just like not every guy, but a lot. I work with a lot of big guys. Like like man, like one day he was trying to show something, but Brock Lesnar asked me if I could put a Kimura on him, and like for my size, I have like real long limbs.
Oh, okay.
But like, dude, this guy, he's letting me put the Kimura on him. I can barely connect my fingers. Like barely, my fingertips are barely touching.
Really? Hey.
And I'm like, I can barely get my toes to body scissor him, to scissor his body.
Oh, crazy.
And I was just like, okay, cool. If he and I were to start, and I'm allowed to start in this Kimura, and I have 10 or 15 seconds to finish before he's even allowed to do anything, it doesn't matter. I can't do anything.
Yeah.
Even if I start in this position.
Is that right?
So I'm used to these, like, I'm used to being around, like, not, like I said, not everyone's like this, but I'm used to being around guys like that. But like, I'll go to my cryo guy. They're such good people, but he's like, and I was telling this one guy, like, oh, we got this big guy, TJ comes in. I don't consider myself a big guy. In my world, I'm very small.
Right.
Compared, when I came back, then I was hurt for 2 years, or I was like hurt and I was away for 2 years. When I came back, now they have the 205 division. I was like, damn, I would have been awesome in this. I'm
You would
bigger
have
than a
owned
lot of
that
these
stuff.
guys.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
could be a power man in this division, I think.
Well, I used to work with a guy who's maybe, I don't know, about 6'2", 240, not the slimmest guy, but stature wise, a fairly big kid.
Yeah.
I'd wrestled Juggernaut the Friday before, 350, 400 pounds.
Yeah.
So this guy's telling me what a big man he is. And I'm like, don't take this the wrong way, bro, but you're actually not that big. Like,
yeah.
And so he was like, I'm bigger than you. I'm like, everyone's bigger than me. That's not a good comparison. But
I
now
know.
that I've been away from it, I see a guy that's like 6'2", 240 and half decent shape. I'm like, ooh, that's a big dude.
Yeah, exactly. It just depends on what realm you're in. Like I'm in WWE, so I just see these guys and I'm around them, and like a guy like Mark Henry is one of the thickest humans I've ever seen in my whole life. I've been in the ring with like Big Show and Khali, so like then when I see a guy at the gym that's maybe a good build, but 180 pounds, and I hear him maybe in the sauna saying he's big. It's like, okay, like you're in good shape.
You're definitely fit. Yeah.
You're not big. They're like,
those
come
are
to my
things.
world. I got some big guys for you.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to talk big, man.
Yeah.
And it's a funny thing. Like you say, perspective changes everything, right? Or sort of surroundings.
Like a guy like Roman Reigns is like 260-pound man.
Yeah. And people, you just don't like, I've always said TV doesn't do it justice. Like, especially a guy like Taker, right? The first time I met Undertaker, and watch your toes, we're name dropping now. But the first time I met Undertaker, I couldn't believe how big his arms were. Like, TV just doesn't do him justice because he's so long. You know what I mean? He's so tall.
I agree.
But you see him walk by, he's like, oh, Jesus, he's a monster. Like, you just don't. Same with Henry Godwin. There was a guy, you know what I mean? Like, it took him a minute and a half just to get by you if he was walking past.
Yeah. And Billy Gunn's a giant one like that blows a lot of people away. Right. Randy Orton too. I think with a lot of people, like I always joke about this with Chucky, talking about getting booked as an extra talent, and like he had a story. I'm not going to name the name, but they were extras, and they were at NXT in Toronto, and he was like, oh. At Takeover, I guess the guy that Chucky was with was like, "Oh, I'm bigger than a lot of these guys. Okay. I have a chance this weekend of maybe getting a good look." And then Chucky just let him say it. He already knew. Chucky'd been an extra before. He's like, "Okay." The next day is SummerSlam in Toronto, and Orton walks by, and he's like, "Man, Orton's that big?" He's like, "That's Randy Orton." He's like, "He's way bigger than me." He's like, "I don't stand a chance."
Yeah, people just don't get it, hey?
And so we make jokes about like the local talent killers. And Chucky's like, he's like, TJ, I think you're one. He's like, I think people, I do get this a lot. I think, and it's not an insult. I understand. Most people, when they meet me, they think I'm a lot bigger than what they thought I would be. Right. And I think what that attains to is that my biggest success in WWE was as a tag team, whether with Harry or with Cesaro. Yeah. These are both big guys.
Those are huge men. Yeah. People don't realize that.
Exactly. So then you see me in comparison. And so in their minds, they probably guess Harry or Cesaro is 6 feet or 6'2". And so they think I'm like 5'6" or something.
Yeah. They think you're like, which is no insult, but they think you're Rey Mysterio kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and so I get that a lot when people meet me, like, wow, you're way bigger than I thought. And like, he's told me that he's heard extras be like, oh man, like Tyson Kidd's a producer and he's way bigger than me. He's way bigger than I thought. What the hell? He was a small guy in WWE. What's going on?
Well, yeah, again, they just don't get it. Like they hear this BS, like, oh, the camera adds 10 pounds. So then they see you on TV and you look to be about 210. So they think you're going to be, 180, 190, and they see in your life and like, no, you're 210. Like that's,
Yeah, yeah.
HD TV is kind of taking all that illusion away,
You're
right?
right. You're right. That's actually very true. I didn't
Yeah,
even think
like,
about that.
well, you remember one of the things that kind of turned me onto it was when that stupid oh Jesus, the fact that I even know the names embarrassing. Desperate Housewives show was on
Oh
TV,
yeah, I used
and
to
all
watch it.
those, they had all those bombshells on that show, and then it got HD TV, and people were all stirred up because you could actually see their wrinkles on their faces and stuff. So it changed that completely. So then, like you say, all of a sudden, these guys are like, well, he's not that big. I see him on TV. Then you see him in real life, and like, oh shit, he is that big. If
And
not larger.
and then the funny thing is, then I feel like it still works the opposite for the girls. Like I feel like they're all so much smaller in person than they've come across. Like Alex was booked as an extra, and he's like said like he saw Ronda run by, or Ronda came up to him and asked like, "Have you guys seen Heyman or something?" and ran off. And he said like it took him a minute, and he was like, "Oh my god, that's Ronda Rousey. She's like so little." which she is. She's little.
Yeah. Yeah. She's well, and that's well, I never thought of that, right? Because yeah, Natty looks larger than life on TV, but yeah, when I see Natty, she's not, when I kind of pictured the last time I saw her, she's definitely not
No.
she's certainly not as tall as I am, and I'm not the tallest guy in the world, right? I was watching something the other
Yeah,
day,
it's
and there was a girl, honestly, her head was barely over the top rope. It was
uh
it was on
Zelina.
AEW.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
she
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
I can't remember her name, but yeah, she was a Russian chick, and
Yeah.
she made me look like Andre the Giant, like she was, So, do you watch World Junior Championships at all?
No, I haven't seen any.
This is just super random,
Yeah.
but I don't know if you have anybody endorsing Workhorse Fitness yet. But there was a kid named Dylan Cousins. He's from Whitehorse, Yukon, and they call him the Workhorse from Whitehorse. And I thought, man, that would be a dynamite pair. I was like,
Yeah,
I almost texted you. I was like, man, I should get a hold of TJ and try to get these two guys in touch somehow.
that's awesome.
This
Hell
could be a
yeah.
match made in heaven. And the kid's a stud. The kid's an absolute stud.
Of course, all those guys in those World Juniors are always so good, man.
Yeah. Oh, and truth is, I kind of prefer that over the Stanley Cup just because the kids are so hungry. They make mistakes, but they work their bags off. Like I just love
Yeah,
that. Yeah. Hey, I want to jump back over to the UFC. I know you're kind of a big fan and a little friendly with Cody Garbrandt.
Yeah.
I've kind of been watching him over the last little while, especially with Dillashaw getting ready to come back. Is that a fight you're interested in seeing again, Garbrandt Dillashaw?
I think so, but I think like I really liked how Cody looked in that Assunção fight. I thought he looked great. I thought he stayed so calm. He I was looking forward to the Figueiredo fight, and then he had a torn bicep.
Right.
But now he's looking to fight Aldo, which I think is a cool fight.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Hey.
It just, I mean, Aldo, I don't think he's that old. I think Aldo's only like 32 or something. 33. He's not that old, Aldo. He's just been around for a very long time.
Right. And well, I think that's something that also needs to reset, sort of to just go off on a tangent. I think that's something that also needs to be reset. Like we talk about 30, I mean, the peak physical condition, 27 to 35 years old, somewhere in there. And I think that's actually changed. You know what I mean? With what we know about nutrition, guys like you being around selling us great product, the health and nutrition. I don't think 32, 33 is as old as it was even a decade ago. You know what I mean?
I think you're right. I think, and I mean, you see a giant shift in WWE, even like AJ Styles debuted, and he was like 38 or 9.
Yeah.
And even a year prior to that, or 2, it would have been just the age alone would have been a big X. Like, okay, we can bring him in for a one-off, but you're never going to be able to actually do anything with him and get behind him because there's just not enough time.
I remember them saying basically at one point you need to have a 10-year run in you. Do you know what I mean? So if you were already 30, good luck.
Dude, I was maybe I was still 28. Maybe I was still on ECW. I just remember Jamie Noble coming out of a meeting one day. I was either 28 or 29. And he's like, "Hey, how old are you?" And I said, "I'm, whatever." He's like, "All right, that's okay, good." Because they said like anybody that's like 30 and over that isn't already like being pushed, they're gonna, if they're already
Really?
being pushed, obviously they're gonna go with, if they're a star, they're gonna go with them, but they're not gonna really give them much of too many extra chances if they're not, if they're over
Right.
30. He's like,
Right.
so you made it. Like, okay.
Jeez.
Like, but it like, and the only reason I really tell that story just to show you what a shift it's been
Yeah, for
now.
sure.
Like it was cool. They were talking, and you just see, like, for example, you see like Damian Priest in the Royal Rumble, and he's 38 years old,
Right.
but he doesn't look it, and
No.
the guy could be a star, man. He looks great, and he has a cool presence and aura about him. So that age is, you're so right. Not only I think has it been pushed back in our world, it almost is non-existent anymore. And we
Right.
got like Tom Brady winning the Super Bowl. You have LeBron doing LeBron things out here. Just like they're battling Father Time, and they're doing a hell of a job against them.
Well, and the one thing, I'm going to flip back to the UFC so I can bring you back. I apologize
Yeah.
for pulling you away there.
No.
The one thing I've kind of been saying about the UFC is, can you imagine when the money's in the UFC, so that an athlete like LeBron James will forego basketball and go to the UFC, what the UFC will look like at that point?
For sure. And I
mean?
think that's like something like, obviously, he's won in however many, we could do the math and you could figure out exactly how many fighters have been in the UFC or in MMA in general. You could, somebody somewhere knows the exact number. Connor's won in however many number that is. He's the one guy who's made this insane amount of money.
Right.
And shown you that, this can be so global.
Yeah.
For on a UFC thing. So to your point, exactly, like he kind of unlocked it to, and all the people before him that unlocked like a GSP and Anderson Silva, John Jones, Brock Lesnar, all these guys, Ronda, they kept hitting like, UFC's biggest payout ever. And then along came Connor. Oh,
yeah. He crossed, like, to say he crossed over is almost an understatement.
Yeah.
I mean, like he's at a point with his fame, he could literally do whatever you want to do. A movie, sure. You want to do TV, whatever you want. Connor, people that question his motivation, I would say, like, if guy's willing to go in there and risk getting his ass kicked when he's got $100 million in the bank,
you
can't question his motivation.
No. I agree with you.
Like, I mean, love him or hate him, he's designed himself around being a heel, but Jesus, how do you question a guy's motivation when he has that much money and is willing to take that risk?
Yeah, come on, man. Like, he knows every time he goes in that cage, he might lose.
Yeah.
And then guess what? Since he talked the biggest game going before, if he loses, it's like almost like times 10, times 100.
For sure. Well, yeah, he's in a position like, again, in that Khabib fight, for instance. I think that's a really good example of people literally paying to see a guy get his ass kicked.
Yep. Yeah. That one did like something like 2.4 million.
Yeah, right. And that was, is Khabib a good draw? Absolutely. There's no question. I mean, he's, and it's something I want to come back to later is, the greatest of all time conversation in the UFC is a pretty hot topic these days.
Yeah.
But to question what he does, like, what this fight last weekend was that the Usman fight did 500,000 buys. You know what I mean? Like, and he's a huge star and he's doing less than 25%. He's doing 20% of the buys that Conor and Khabib are doing.
I know.
Like, people don't realize, like, well, 500,000, that's a lot of buys. That's a heck of a lot of buys.
It is
2+ million buys. Like,
yeah, man.
I'm sorry, but that's not even the same ballpark. Right?
No, you're right. And it isn't. And I think, I think you, like you were saying, like, you're going to have these athletes that are they're going to see a Conor and go, maybe I'm that guy.
Right.
Maybe I'm going to bet on myself and I'm that guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're saying like a LeBron James style athlete coming to the UFC, whereas like he's almost at a crossroads and it's like, going this team sport might be a little bit safer route. I'm pretty good at both, but I'm going to bet on myself and go to this MMA.
Yeah. Or do you end up with a two sport, is there a time, this just came to me because it's ridiculous, but is there a time where you see a guy, and I'll use Greg Hardy, came out of football and then got into UFC. Do you see a time where there's like a Deion Sanders where a guy's playing football 18 games a year and then screw it, takes a fight in the off season? You know what I mean? Something like that.
Some guy's going to try to pull that off. I mean, that's again, the kind of the weird, funny bridges that Connor's been, he fought UFC, then he boxed Floyd.
Yeah. So it's happened already, I guess. Yeah. I mean,
so he's trying to, he's like, when he started taking shots at WWE, I knew exactly what he was doing. I didn't get bothered with it. I knew that he's a smart guy. That was his first loss in UFC. He lost to Nate. It was before the Nate rematch when he started insulting WWE and WWE fans.
Right.
And in my mind, I remember I woke up to text. My friend's like, "You see what Connor's saying about WWE?" And I see like all the guys responding to him, and I was like, "Oh, what are these guys doing, man? Don't do this." And I sat and I was thinking, I'm like, okay, he obviously can't say too much about Nate. Nate just choked him out. So like, here's this rematch. How's he building this rematch? He's not going to build it by saying, "Hey, if I hit you, I'm going to knock you out." He just proved otherwise.
Yeah.
So I think, man, the Connor Nate rematch ends up prior to the Connor Khabib fight being the biggest pay-per-view in UFC history by a little bit. And so what I honestly think Connor or someone on his team went and looked at what was the biggest pay-per-view before that, which was UFC 100, which is Brock Lesnar versus Frank Mir. And then someone probably broke down that Brock had a bunch of big pay-per-views under his belt. Right. And they were like, well, why did Brock draw so big? Well, first off, Brock's an anomaly all to himself.
Yeah, he's special, man.
Big time. But if the one thing that we like, you can't put your finger on a lot of the things that make Brock. You can't put your finger on it. He's so special. But the one thing that we can, if we're looking at metrics like that, is he has this wrestling audience behind him.
Right.
Now were the wrestling fans shunned and mad that Brock left WWE, so they were watching to see him lose? Or are they watching to see him win since he's still one of their guys? Like, there's probably a good split of that. But that first pay-per-view, the first Frank Mir versus Brock fight did a giant spike in numbers. And right away, I've seen Dana in interviews be like, we knew we were onto something.
Right.
So I don't know if Connor figured, okay, I know these wrestling fans will tune in to see a guy get his ass kicked. So like, maybe I stir them up and insult every guy there. And because then that Nate rematch did a little bit bigger number than UFC 100.
Well, he's like a Chael Sonnen. He has no problem being the heel, right? And I think when you're selling tickets, when you're selling pay-per-views, you don't always need that. The Conor Poirier fight was going to sell, he
didn't need it.
Almost no matter what, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, Connor's come out now and said, well, no more Mr. Nice Guy. So, his next, whoever he fights next, there's just going to be trash talk to spare.
Yeah.
Right? And the truth is, I can't wait because, I love good shit talk, right? Like it's, now I want to ask you, it's a pretty hot debated topic. And I know you're probably almost as historical with the UFC as you are with WWE, or wrestling in general. Who do you honestly think do you put in a conversation for greatest of all time? And I'm not going to harness you to say one guy, because you and I have these conversations all the time. Yeah. It's like, we can narrow it down to a few, but then it's subjective. Sure, right?
It's tough. In the conversation, GSP.
For sure.
Khabib. John Jones. And we'll see in a few weeks, but I like Adesanya's. He's still young, but he's entering that round. When you see a guy he basically knocked out Whitaker twice. He dropped him at the end of the first round and then finished him in the second. And when you look at Adesanya, you don't think he has this power, but he clearly has great precision. For sure. Because he dropped Costa pretty handedly too. Yeah. And then I know the Romero fight obviously wasn't the fight people were looking for, but Adesanya was the one who called out Romero. He's the only guy in that position that's going to be calling out Romero.
Yeah, who wants to fight a silverback? Seriously.
Yeah, then I think he was obviously wanting Yoel to engage, and obviously Adesanya is a counter striker, and he was. Yeah. And when Yoel just stood there, it like changed everything. Well, and what made it a little bit worse was it followed probably not only the best women's fight of all time, but one of the greatest fights of all time in that Zhang versus Joanna.
Okay, yeah.
Fight was insane. And then dude,
that's the one where Joanna had the big thing on her head.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's the last time I was on the road. I was watching that at the hotel in Philly on my iPad. Watched that pay-per-view, did Elimination Chamber the next day, and then I've been Florida-based ever since. Yeah, I flew home, and then like that next week. So those are kind of. So I would say GOATs, because obviously what it's going to come down to is then like, okay, who's undefeated? is what a lot of people are going to go to.
Right.
And then so like GSP, he avenged both of his losses. He beat Matt Hughes twice, and he
Yeah,
beat
in
Matt Serra.
spectacular fashion, really.
Yeah, he finished both guys.
Yeah.
Like his 2 losses, he finished Matt Hughes both times, and he finished Serra.
He and no disrespect to Serra, because he was a great fighter to be a world champion. I don't care how anyone wants to tear that down. But GSP, I mean, when talk about avenging a loss, he unfortunately beat Serra like a dog. Like that was that was cool.
And when GSP came out, I didn't expect them to beat Bisping. To be honest, I thought just the size would be too much, and then he beat Bisping.
And again, in spectacular fashion, you think he was going to, all but drop him and choke him out, right? Like, geez, I didn't see that coming.
So I think at this moment, those guys are on the GOAT list. Is Khabib, GSP, John Jones. Obviously there's a lot of asterisks with John Jones, but it is what it is.
Well, I think if people want to asterisk John Jones, I think the conversation I take it then is, okay, he's got 14 title defenses or 13, a win and 13 title defenses. So that right away, he's got to put him near the top. So then people, like you say, even I'm kind of guilty of sometimes saying, well, you got caught cheating, right? But at the same time, so then, okay, so let's just take the conversation to who's the most talented fighter of all times. Well, I think then we all hands down, you got to say John Jones, right? Like, that guy's got a skill set that is just I think he can do shit even he doesn't know he can do yet. You know what I mean? He's one of those guys.
When he comes out and says crazy things like that, he didn't even train for that first Gustafsson fight.
Right.
And then I remember thinking yeah, right. But then you see him in the rematch and he snuck Gustafsson out pretty quickly, maybe second round finish him.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, maybe he didn't train before that first one. And that's why it went 5 rounds and was a war.
And even take that just a bit of a comparison, Mike Tyson's considered to be, one of the greatest of my generation. And he didn't train for Buster Douglas, and look what happened to him.
And have you ever seen the video where he shows that he knocks Buster Douglas down for more than a 10 count?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting things in that fight.
Well,
it's just so crazy though.
As soon as we start talking about Don King, I start taking the conversation a different direction, because I don't, as much as Don King did, Don King's a terrible human being. Like, a lot of people, when you tell them that Don King went to jail for murder, they don't know. You know what I mean? The guy's a straight up thug, man. If you look at the history of Don King, he's a straight up street thug that made it. Like, I don't, all power to him for what he built. But yeah, man, he I'm pretty sure if you do the research, he beat a guy to death because he owed him money.
Wow.
Yeah, Don King's a thug, right? So
as a kid, I don't understand what Don King was. I don't. But what's you said, to his credit, even though I don't know I didn't know, oh, he's the promoter. He's I didn't know that as a kid. I just would see him on these press conferences all the time.
Right.
And so to that point is I don't know who this guy is, but I know his name. I know what he looks like. I know when he's spoofed on Simpsons, I know exactly that's Don King. As a kid, you know what I'm saying? He like you said, he made it. He has this crazy charisma or whatever. Everybody knows who the hell Don King is.
Well, and again, crossed over to pop culture, right? When you can be a boxing guy all day, but once you make it to the Simpsons, right? I remember when Brett got on the Simpsons.
Yeah.
What a big deal that was. Holy shit, Brett is going to be on the Simpsons. And now again, I don't know if this is funny for me to talk about, but I can remember going up to Stu's house for Sunday dinner right after Brett had done the Simpsons, and he was there. And I'm holy shit, Brett's here. And he had this Simpsons jacket that had all the characters on the back. And it was the coolest. It was the coolest thing. I remember thinking, I think we'd maybe took it for granted because the Hearts are from Calgary. You know what I mean? Growing up, you kind of heard the Hart name all the time.
Yeah.
Stu gave me ribbons or medals at tournaments before. I think Owen gave me a medal at the University of Calgary tournament once. So all of a sudden you've kind of got this, all of a sudden you kind of realize holy cow, I know I watched The Simpsons and Brett was on there, but now I'm looking at Brett and he's wearing the Simpsons jacket. That was next level stuff, right?
Yeah. It's so funny, man. You're right. Some of it, I think, and I talk about this a lot too. Some things, being from Calgary and growing up in Calgary, some things, especially when it comes to wrestling, almost a little bit taken for granted that you don't realize. Obviously, I realized. I remember I went to Ontario once for 2 weeks in 99, and just talking with the guys, and they're like, oh, this so-and-so, like he almost made it, but this happened, and so, this guy's so good. And then I see these guys that maybe whatever. I didn't think they were that great.
Right.
But like they were kind of talking about these guys like they were like these top guys. And like, I guess that's maybe all they had to compare it to. And I didn't realize I was 18, 19. And I realized like then, oh, I'm kind of spoiled. Like I'm coming up around like Brett, Davey, Owen, Jim. Like I've seen what success in this business looks like.
Yeah.
And then so when I go somewhere else and they're talking about like, and this sounds so bad, I got to think of a better way to phrase it. But like,
oh man, just spit it out. You're on the Duke You Suck show. You can say whatever you want.
And they're talking about like some guy that's kind of small potatoes that maybe could have made it, or
right.
and I talk about that all the time too. Like the difference between like this guy that on like is maybe like a household name, and the guy that you don't might just be a break. They might be equally talented. Just I've seen a lot of great guys not get a break. That's 100% true. But I think in a good way, I don't think in a bad way. I think in a good way, it was really good that I was around Davey, Owen, Brett, and Jim and see what kind of success can be attained in wrestling rather than just see it on TV and dream about it, but to actually see it. And like, maybe like, obviously there was times I lived with Davey. So I did get, I'm driving with Davey in his Jag going to work out at BJ's. That was cool, right. But it's not my money. Like if we stop and get McDonald's, he'd buy me McDonald's. I can't pay for anything.
Yeah, but the dream becomes tangible, right? It's something, then it becomes a reality. It's, when your friends or your mom, and and I'm sure you heard it, because I know my parents weren't super thrilled when they heard I was going to get blasted in the head with steel chairs once in a while.
Yeah.
There's no money in that. You can't do this. You can't do that. It's like, when you have an example and you've seen the model of people that become successful at it, seen, not only what they did to become successful, what the fruit of that success is. It makes you hungrier, especially when people are like, well, you can't do it. Like, you don't actually know what you're talking about, and I'm going to show you,
Like even without naming names, like it's funny, like when guys would, and I know you've seen this a million times, just as many times as I've seen it, but when guys would come into like the dungeon or just Alberta wrestling in general and be kind of name dropping, it's like, well, about that. Well, you see, we kind of deal with like, for Brett, it's hard to have much more success than Brett's had at that time in late 90s. It's hard to have as much success as he had. I mean, even his WCW run, he still is a world champion there a couple times, or for sure one time maybe. Well, if they were, I don't know the exact number.
How they use Brett is a completely different conversation. We could do a whole
podcast. But he's still a world champion in WCW. So like, you can't come in 2002. You can't come to the dungeon and name drop a friend of yours that had a look one time when, like, in Calgary, we've dealt with guys that have had a lot of success, and like you said, made it very tangible. And I don't mean that in a cocky way or anything like that. I just mean, I went and wrestled other places and saw people like kind of drop names and not drop names in like a weird way where I was like, it just didn't even make sense.
Seeking clout from dropping someone else's name.
Yeah, and guys that like hadn't made it and like making excuses to why that guy didn't make it, which the excuse may be real. Yeah, I don't know. Sure. Like it's a thing in Canada where like, man, you take that risk when you go and cross that border to go wrestle without a work visa.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you get caught one time and you're banned for 5 years.
Well, and that's, people will ask me, Jordy, how come you never made it to the WWE? And I mean, I always say there's so many factors. There's so many reasons. Early on, I got offered a tryout. I didn't know anything about wrestling when I got into it. I'm from an age before the internet was barely a thing when I started wrestling. Yeah. I wasn't a tape trader. I didn't read a lot. So I had no idea what I was getting into. Looking back, when people say what makes it and what doesn't, I think what you say, kind of just getting an opportunity or taking your opportunities, you have to do it. But, I always kind of, like you say, do I want to risk going down south without a visa, traveling without a visa, getting in trouble, and then, going home, and then my wife like, oh, I can't go to the States, I'm banned because I was working.
I was just about to say, like, I know you like going to Vegas.
Yeah.
As a vacation.
Well, yeah, for sure. So for me,
imagine you can't go to Vegas for 5 years because you got caught going to do, you're like, I'm going to go just do one show and you got caught.
Yeah, my wife loves me,
It's
but I know she'd
crazy.
stab me in the face, right? Like she don't hate that outlet mall, you know.
So
And the other thing too is I was always, to me, and this is probably the wrong reason. We got into the business because somebody told us, we were coaching amateur wrestling to you guys, and we
yeah,
were told like you could make a living wrestling. So as much as once I got into pro wrestling and started doing it, I was addicted to it for sure. But I legit got into pro wrestling because somebody told me I could make a living wrestling. And that's always the
sure.
wrong reason to get into something. You know what I mean? Once I was into it, I was addicted to it, and definitely applied myself to the craft for sure. It wasn't just
And that's
about,
the secret.
you know,
It's just to like, and I guess if you don't get bit by that bug, then maybe that's why. But once you get bit by that bug, like you can't help but become immersed in it.
well, and that's, I mean, I remember wrestling Teddy my first match, and I want to say we wrestled to a Broadway. And at the end of the Broadway, we were supposed to do
That,
something.
yeah, that is your first match.
Yeah, and I threw him out of the ring afterwards and beat him up a little bit on the outside, and a fan threw garbage at me. And once I realized I could do that, once I realized I could have that pull on a fan, it wasn't about
Yeah,
money anymore. It was about, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I love to do. But, and
yeah.
so, when you say like, you got to have a passion for it. Like when I hear like, Stone Cold Steve Austin would sleep in his car and eat potatoes. I don't know if I was that hungry. You know what I mean? Where I know for you in particular, you put it all on wrestling, right? I always had a safety net, which is another reason. You know what I mean? And I could never tell you how much I respect that, right? Like it's for instance, a lot of guys went and did that England tour, kind of mid
Yeah.
90s, the late 90s, early 2000s. And I remember Tiger Khan went on that tour, and he was there for 10 days. And I was going back and forth with Frank Cullen at the time, because he didn't like my look, but I guess people told him like he can work, so you should see him work. And he wanted me to send him a tape. And just I'm kind of getting this tape ready. Tiger Khan phones me from New York. He's like, don't go over there. You have to drive for 6 hours with your bag on your lap. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I'm not going there for 50 pounds a day when I can stay home with my wife and make $100 a day anyways, so.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, exactly. And that was one of like, I luckily didn't have the bags on my lap, but like, I remember first time I went to England, I was there for 4.5 months
Right.
of those drives. Now, Tiger's right. He was right about the long drives. The good thing is, so I'm not always the best at this, but I try to be. I try to be the silver lining type guy. And
Right.
so I'm like, well, at least it's not me doing the driving. I'm just sitting in the car. Like,
Yeah.
and then you get to WWE and then you do all the drive, like almost every mile the Hart Dynasty ever did is me behind the wheel. And
Right.
I go, and then I'm like, I've logged so many highway hours in this country driving, so many that
Yeah.
like
Well, and
the
not that
times
there's
I
any
was sitting in the car as a passenger in England, it was just my warm up.
yeah, getting you ready. Well, there's no comparison, right? But I can still remember I was every, Saturday morning, have to haul ass out the door, go rent those minivans so we could take eight of us up to Edmonton. You know what I
Oh
mean?
man, I remember like driving up there once through a crazy snowstorm, like calling Kurt, like, hey, he's like, okay, if you guys can get changed in the car. I just remember like Theo and somebody just had a match, like literally straight out of the van when we pulled up.
Jesus, the life of independent wrestling. You
Yeah,
always hear about the Candelo Northern Death tours, and I don't want to minimize that because I've heard some horrifying stories about
yeah.
those tours. But yeah, and again, there's probably no comparison. But until you've been driving home that dirty old Highway 2 in a foggy snowstorm, using that white line to get you back to Calgary,
Oh
you know what I mean?
man,
Those are dues paid, man.
I've been in the car with Ross Hart where Harry's asleep in the back seat. Mind you, Harry's like 12 years old. These are around like your guys, like that first little bit where you guys were having your first matches.
Right.
We did like kind of those like grouped like 10 shows, like Troshu and all these
Yeah.
shows.
10
I
shows and
remember
11 nights. I remember that trip.
I remember like riding to like one with Ross, Harry sleeping in the back. It's like a snowstorm. It's not just snowing, it's a snowstorm. I like, and Ross like, oh, I'll turn on my high beams. Bro, the high beams in like if you've driven through a snowstorm, you understand like sometimes you turn on those high beams, it makes it worse.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it better. So you turn them on, it's actually worse. And he's like, oh, this is better. And I was like sitting in the front seat and I was like, there's no way you can see. I can't see anything. There's no way. Those high beams didn't make it any better. And so I just remember so Davey had that bad car accident with Ross,
Right.
Going through the mountains. And dude, this is like, it's not a, it was a snowy day already. So I just remember when we left the house, Harry is like a little bit ahead of me and Davey stopped me. And Davey said, hey, just make sure that Ross drives safely.
Right.
He's like, I've been in a car accident with Ross, so I'm a little weary. I said, all right, I understand. So like while Harry's sleeping, here's this blizzard, here's Ross with the high beams, we can't see a damn thing. All I'm thinking in my head is like, oh my God, like Davey pulled me aside and like made me like promise. So like I'm so tired. I just want to sleep so bad, but I can't because Harry's sleeping. I got to make sure like I was like so like
just
I was
staring
like
at Ross the whole time.
ever every 5 seconds. I'm just like, hey Ross, you okay? He's like, yes. Ross, you doing okay? Yes, I'm good. You must have been so annoyed with how many times I asked if he's good.
That's hilarious.
He didn't know I had an agenda. I'd had a mission I'd been sent on, like Terminator.
Well, and that's a lot of pressure, man. When a guy the size of Davey and somebody that you respect that much too kind of tells you, like, hey, look after my son. You know what I mean? That's pressure people don't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, buddy. I'm going to save some for another podcast. I'm going to drag you back on.
Oh yeah.
I think we're in a good spot to wrap up.
We can talk a lot more about like training the dungeon. I talk about it a lot in a lot of interviews I do. Just you guys doing the amateur wrestling, and so like it was almost like I equate a lot of things to that, but like Wile E. Coyote and the dog when they check in and check out. They check in. Coyote's job is to get the sheep. The dog's job is to protect the sheep. They beat each other up, then they check out and they're friends again. That's kind of like we'd come to your guys' amateur wrestling real early in the morning.
Right.
You'd be our coaches. And then we'd go to the dungeon where like I Harry and I had a little bit more experience than you guys. We started a little bit before you guys. You guys were men. I was a kid. Harry was a boy. But like
crazy.
But like we'd go from like you guys coaching us to amateur wrestling to like us all learning together, but us also helping you guys with some pro wrestling like in the exact same day on a Saturday. Yeah,
it was, and I have to go do Ross's aerobics class.
Those are awesome, and those became a thing, man.
Yeah, that was awesome. All right, buddy, I'm going to let you go. I appreciate
sounds good, Jordy,
man.
Hell yeah!
Thanks again for coming on. I can't wait to have you back.
I'll be on multiple times. This is fun.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, TJ.
Bye-bye.